I'm sitting at the kitchen table, the one we picked out together at that overpriced boutique furniture store in the city, the one with the reclaimed oak and the faint scratches from where our daughter, Lila, used to drag her toy cars across it. The coffee in my mug has gone cold, but I don't notice until I take a sip and grimace. It's 6:47 a.m., and the house is quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional chirp of a sparrow outside. My wife, Claire, is still upstairs, probably scrolling through her phone or getting ready for her day at the gallery. She's always been an early riser, but lately, she lingers in bed longer than she used to. I tell myself it's because she's tired. Her job's been demanding, curating exhibits, schmoozing with artists and collectors. But there's a knot in my gut that's been growing for weeks, maybe months, and it's not just the coffee. My name's Ethan, and I'm 38. A structural engineer who spends most of his days poring over blueprints and arguing with contractors about load-bearing walls. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and it's kept us comfortable. Nice house in the suburbs, Lila's private school, Claire's leased Audi. We've been married for 12 years, and I'd always thought we were solid. Not perfect, but who is? We had our fights, sure, about money, about how much time I spent at work, about her wanting to redecorate the living room every other year. But we always came back to each other. Always found a way to laugh it off over a bottle of wine or a late-night talk in bed. At least, that's how I remember it. The first hint that something was off came about 3 months ago. Claire started staying late at the gallery, saying they were prepping for a big show featuring some avant-garde sculptor from Berlin. I didn't think much of it at first. She's always been passionate about her work, and I've never been the jealous type. But then there were the little things. Her phone was always face down now, and she'd take it with her even to the bathroom. She started wearing perfume again, the kind she used to wear when we were dating, sharp and floral, like she was trying to make a statement. And her wardrobe shifted, tighter dresses, bolder colors, heels that clicked louder on the hardwood floors. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it was just a phase, maybe a midlife thing. She was 36, and maybe she was just trying to feel young again. But the knot in my gut tightened when I met Julian. He was the sculptor, the one whose exhibit was keeping Claire so busy. We were at the gallery's opening night, and I dragged myself there in a suit I hadn't worn since our last anniversary dinner. The place was packed. Artsy types in black turtlenecks, collectors with too much money, waiters weaving through with trays of Prosecco. Claire was in her element, flitting from group to group, her laugh carrying over the murmur of the crowd. I was nursing a glass of wine, feeling like a fish out of water, when she introduced me to him. "Ethan, this is Julian Voss," she said, her hand on my arm but her eyes on him. The genius behind all this. Julian was tall, maybe 6 feet 3 inches, with a lean build and a face that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. Sharp cheekbones, dark stubble, eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was maybe 40, with a faint German accent that made everything he said sound profound. He shook my hand, his grip firm but not aggressive, and smiled in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, Ethan," he said. "Claire's told me so much about you." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah. She's been talking about your work non-stop. Big night for you." He waved a hand, like it was nothing. "It's all Claire's doing. She has an eye for beauty, doesn't she?" There was something in the way he said it, the way his gaze lingered on her just a fraction too long. Claire laughed, a little too brightly, and touched his arm. "Oh, stop, Julian. You're embarrassing me." I didn't say anything, but I felt it, the knot twisting, pulling tighter. The rest of the night I watched them. Not overtly, not like some paranoid husband, but I couldn't help it. The way she leaned in when he spoke, the way he'd brush her elbow when he pointed out a piece. It wasn't blatant, but it was there, like a current running under the surface. When we got home that night, I tried to bring it up, casually. "So, Julian seems intense," I said, loosening my tie as we got ready for bed. Claire was at her vanity, wiping off her makeup. "He's an artist, Ethan. They're all intense. It's what makes them good." "Yeah. But he's got a thing for you, doesn't he?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just grateful for the show." And he's European, they're all a bit flirty. It's cultural. I let it go, but I didn't believe her. Not entirely. Over the next few weeks, the signs piled up. Text messages that made her smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then quickly lock her phone when I walked into the room. Late nights at the gallery that stretched into after-hours drinks with the team. A new necklace I didn't recognize. A delicate silver chain with a tiny pendant shaped like a crescent moon. When I asked about it, she said it was a gift from a client, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I started checking things I never thought I'd check. Her phone bill, for one. There were dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize, sometimes at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I didn't have her passcode. She'd changed it a few months back, saying she'd forgotten the old one, but I didn't need it to see the pattern. I started driving by the gallery some nights, telling myself I was just in the area, but really, I was looking for her car. Once, I saw it parked there at 11 p.m., but the gallery was dark. Another time, I saw her walking out with Julian. Their heads bent close as they laughed about something. They didn't touch, but they didn't need to. It was in the way they moved together, like they shared a secret. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be sure, but more than that, I was afraid. Afraid of what she'd say. Afraid of what it would mean for us. For Lila. So I kept quiet, and the knot in my gut grew into a stone, heavy and cold. Then came the night that broke me open. It was a Thursday, and Claire had said she was meeting a collector for dinner. I was home with Lila, helping her with a science project about the solar system. We were gluing glitter onto a styrofoam Jupiter when my phone buzzed with a text from a buddy, Mike, who worked downtown. Hey man, just saw Claire at La Valette with some dude. Thought you were out of town or something. La Valette was a fancy French place, the kind where you needed a reservation weeks in advance. I'd never been there with Claire. She always said it was too pretentious, but I knew it wasn't the kind of place you went with a client. My hands shook as I typed back. You sure it was her? Yeah, dude. Red dress, hair up. Guy was tall, dark hair. Looked cozy. I put the phone down, my heart pounding so hard I thought Lila might hear it. She was chattering about how Jupiter had 79 moons, but I barely registered it. I told her I needed to make a quick call and stepped into the garage. I called Claire's phone. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I don't know what made me do it, but I got in my car and drove to La Valette. It was a 20-minute drive, and every second of it, I was telling myself to turn back, that I was being crazy, that there was an explanation. But I kept driving. When I got there, I parked across the street and waited. The restaurant's windows were big, glowing with warm light, and I could see the silhouettes of couples inside. Then I saw her. Claire was at a corner table, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair swept up in a loose bun. Across from her was Julian, leaning forward, his hand resting on hers. She was smiling, that soft, private smile she used to give me when we were first dating. They weren't kissing, weren't doing anything overt, but it was unmistakable. The intimacy, the ease, the way they looked at each other like no one else in the room existed. I sat there for what felt like hours watching them. At one point, Julian reached across the table and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and she didn't pull away. When they finally left, they walked out arm in arm and I followed them at a distance like some kind of private detective in a bad movie. They went to a hotel, one of those boutique places with a neon sign and a valet. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Lila was asleep when I got back, her science project half finished on the dining table. I sat there in the dark, staring at the glittery Jupiter, and felt something inside me crack. Claire came home at 2:13 a.m. I heard her keys in the lock, her heels on the floor. She didn't come to bed. She slept on the couch, claiming she didn't want to wake me. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Kissed me on the cheek, asked about Lila's project, poured herself coffee like it was any other day. But it wasn't, and I knew what I had to do. The days after that night at La Valette were a blur of quiet rage and calculated restraint. I went through the motions, dropped Lila off at school, went to work, nodded at my colleagues' small talk about the upcoming bridge project. But inside, I was a furnace, burning with betrayal and the need to do something. Claire's deception wasn't just a wound. It was a violation, a theft of everything I'd built my life around. 12 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, the trust I'd placed in her. It all lay shattered, and she didn't even know I knew. Not yet. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but I held back. Rage without a plan is just noise, and I wasn't about to let her slip away with excuses or tears. I needed proof, and I needed a way to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. I started by gathering evidence. I wasn't proud of it, but pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. I bought a small voice-activated recorder from an electronics store, the kind used for lectures or interviews, and hid it in the lining of Claire's work bag. It was a risk. She was meticulous about her things, but I was careful, sewing it into a seam with a needle and thread from Lila's old craft kit. The first few days, it picked up nothing but gallery chatter, her talking to clients, laughing with her assistant, Mara, discussing lighting for a new exhibit. But on the fourth day, I hit gold. I was sitting in my home office after Lila went to bed, listening to the recordings on my laptop with headphones on so Claire wouldn't hear. She was upstairs, supposedly reading, though I'd noticed her phone glowing in her hand when I passed by the bedroom. The recording started with the usual, her heels clicking on the gallery floor, a phone call about a shipment of frames, but then I heard his voice. Julian. They were in her office, the door closed, the hum of the air conditioner in the background. You're distracted today, Julian said, his voice low, teasing. Thinking about me? Claire laughed, that same bright laugh she'd used at the gallery opening, but softer now, intimate. You're impossible, you know that? Impossibly charming, you mean? There was a pause, then the sound of fabric rustling, like someone shifting closer. When can I see you again? Properly, I mean, not here. Julian, we have to be careful, she said. But there was no conviction in her voice, just a playful caution. Ethan's been, I don't know, quiet lately. I think he's stressed at work. Ethan, Julian said, and I could hear the smirk in his tone. The engineer, always building bridges, never crossing them. Don't, Claire said, but she laughed again. He's a good man. It's just complicated. Complicated, Julian echoed. Or maybe you're just bored. Admit it, Claire. You need this. You need me. There was another pause, longer this time, and then the unmistakable sound of a kiss, soft, lingering, the kind that carries a promise. My stomach churned, but I kept listening. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. They didn't say much after that, just murmurs, more rustling, the creak of her office chair. The recorder cut off when the room went quiet for too long. I sat there, staring at the laptop screen, the audio waveform frozen like a heartbeat that had flatlined. It wasn't just confirmation, it was a gut punch, every word a blade. She'd called me a good man, but it wasn't a defense. It was a dismissal, a way to justify her betrayal. And Julian's mockery, his smug certainty that he had her, that I was some oblivious fool. It lit a fire in me that wouldn't go out. I didn't stop there. I needed more, not just for myself but for what I was starting to plan. I created a burner email account and contacted a private investigator, a guy named Vince who came recommended by a contractor I knew from a past project. Vince was ex-cop, mid-50s, with a gravelly voice and a no-nonsense attitude. I met him at a diner outside town, a place with sticky tables and waitresses who called you Han. I gave him Claire's schedule, Julian's name, and a photo I'd pulled from the gallery's website. I didn't tell him everything, just that I suspected an affair and needed proof. Discreet's my middle name, Vince said, scribbling notes on a napkin. You want photos, texts, locations, I'll get M. You want to know what they're eating for breakfast, I can do that too. But let me ask you something, Ethan. What's your endgame here? I sipped my coffee, avoiding his eyes. I just need to know the truth. He snorted. Sure, but I've seen guys like you before. You get the truth, then you want justice. Just don't do anything stupid, all right? Let the lawyers handle it. I nodded, but I was already thinking beyond lawyers. Divorce was an option, sure, but it felt too clean, too easy for her. She'd walk away with half of everything, maybe even Lila's affection, spinning some story about how we'd grown apart. And Julian? He'd move on to the next conquest, his ego unscathed. No, I wanted something that would hurt, something that would make them both feel the consequences. Vince delivered his first report a week later, emailed to my burner account. It was thorough, timestamps, locations, photos. Claire and Julian at a wine bar downtown, their knees touching under the table. Julian's car parked outside a motel in a neighboring town, Claire's Audi nearby. A grainy shot of them outside the gallery after hours, his hand on her lower back as they slipped into an alley. There were text messages too, intercepted from Julian's phone somehow. Vince didn't explain and I didn't ask. They were explicit, not in language but in intent. Plans to meet, pet names, references to moments I didn't want to imagine. One text from Claire read, asterisk. You make me feel alive again. I didn't know I was missing this. Asterisk. I printed the report and kept it in a locked drawer in my office, along with the recorder. Every night, I'd add to my collection, more recordings, more notes on her schedule, her lies. She told me she was at a fundraiser one night, but Vince's photos showed her at Julian's loft, a converted warehouse in the arts district. Another time, she said she was visiting her sister, but her phone's location data. Vince had shown me how to track it, placed her at a bed and breakfast 2 hours away. The lies were so effortless, so practiced, that I wondered how long this had been going on, how many other Julians there might have been. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I kissed Claire good morning, asked about her day, helped Lila with her homework. It was torture, smiling at the woman who was tearing my life apart. But I had to. If she suspected I knew, she'd cover her tracks, maybe even turn it around on me. I'd seen it happen to guys at work, wives who played the victim, spinning tales of neglect to justify their affairs. I wasn't going to let Claire do that. The plan started to take shape in pieces like a blueprint coming together on my drafting table. I didn't want to just expose her. I wanted to dismantle her world, the way she'd dismantled mine. Julian, too, he wasn't just a bystander. He was complicit, reveling in his role as the other man. They both needed to pay, not with violence or anything crude, but with something that would linger, something they couldn't escape. The first piece was Claire's career. The gallery was her pride, her identity, the place where she'd built a reputation as a tastemaker. I started digging into its finances, using my engineering mindset to follow the money. The gallery was privately owned by a wealthy couple, the Hendersons, who trusted Claire to run it but weren't above scrutiny. I found discrepancies, overinflated invoices for art shipments, unexplained expenses, cash withdrawals that didn't match the books. It wasn't hard to plant the idea of an audit. I used another burner email to send an anonymous tip to the Hendersons, suggesting financial irregularities and attaching a few scanned receipts I'd found in Claire's office during one of her late nights. I didn't know if she was actually embezzling, but the suspicion would be enough to put her under a microscope. The second piece was Julian. His career was built on his image, mysterious, talented, untouchable. I started researching his past, scouring art blogs, exhibition reviews, even his social media. There were whispers of scandals. A gallery assistant in Munich who'd accused him of harassment. A collector in London who'd claimed he'd sold a forged piece. Nothing concrete, but enough to work with. I created fake accounts on art forums, posing as insiders, and began spreading rumors. Subtle at first, questioning the authenticity of his work, then bolder, hinting at unethical behavior. I even sent an anonymous letter to a critic who'd championed him, suggesting they look into his studio practices. The art world thrives on reputation, and reputations are fragile. The third piece was personal. Clay cared about how people saw her, her friends, her family, our neighbors. I started laying the groundwork to expose her affair, not to her directly but to the people she valued. I drafted a letter, and signed, detailing her relationship with Julian, with dates and places from Vince's reports. I didn't send it yet, but I kept it ready, addressed to her sister, her best friend, even the PTA president at Lila's school. I also started collecting mementos, photos of her with Julian, receipts from their hotel stays, the crescent moon necklace she still wore. I wasn't sure how I'd use them, but they felt like ammunition. Every step I took, I felt the furnace inside me burn hotter. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. Claire and Julian thought they could play me for a fool, but they'd underestimated me. I wasn't just an engineer who built bridges. I was a man who could tear them down. By the end of the month, the pieces were in place. The Hendersons had hired an accountant to review the gallery's books, and Claire was stressed, snapping at me over dinner about meddling investors. Julian's name was starting to pop up in the wrong kind of conversations online, and I heard from a gallery contact that a major collector had pulled out of his next show. The letter to Claire's circle was still in my drawer, but I was ready to mail it. All I needed was the right moment. That moment came sooner than I expected. One night, Claire came home late, her hair slightly mussed, her perfume too strong. She said she'd been at a client dinner, but I knew better. Vince had texted me a photo of her leaving Julian's loft. I waited until she was in the shower, then took her phone from her bag. She'd gotten careless, leaving it unlocked. I scrolled through her texts with Julian, my hands shaking. The latest one, sent an hour ago, read, asterisk, tonight was perfect. I don't know how I'll go back to pretending tomorrow. Asterisk. I put the phone back, my mind racing. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow she'd stop pretending. Tomorrow, I'd start building the trap that would bring her world crashing down. The morning after I saw that text, the house felt like a pressure cooker, every creak of the floorboards and clink of dishes amplifying the tension I carried in my chest. Claire was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured orange juice for Lila, who was chattering about a school play she'd been cast in. I sat at the table, pretending to read emails on my phone, but I was watching Claire, her movements, her smile, the way she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with that damn crescent moon necklace glinting at her throat. She was so good at this, the performance of normalcy, that it made my blood boil. How could she stand there, playing the devoted wife and mother, when hours ago she was with him? I didn't sleep that night, my mind churning with plans, refining the edges of what I'd been building for weeks. Today was the day it all came together. I'd spent the previous night finalizing everything. The anonymous tip to the Hendersons about the gallery's finances had already triggered an audit, and Claire had been fielding calls from them all week, her voice tight with worry when she thought I wasn't listening. The rumors about Julian were spreading like wildfire in the art world. 2 galleries had dropped his upcoming shows after a scathing blog post, seeded by one of my fake accounts, questioned the provenance of his sculptures. But those were just the opening moves. The real blow was coming today, and it would be personal, precise, and devastating. I started with the letter. I'd revised it a dozen times, keeping it factual but cutting. Asterisk, Claire Thompson, your friend, sister, colleague, has been carrying on an affair with the sculptor Julian Voss for months. Here are the details, dates, places, proof. She's been lying to everyone, including her husband and daughter. Asterisk, I'd attached copies of Vince's photos, Claire and Julian at the wine bar, the motel, the alley behind the gallery, along with screenshots of their texts. I printed 15 copies, sealed them in plain envelopes, and addressed them to her inner circle. Her sister, her best friend, her yoga group, the gallery's board, even the Hendersons. I didn't mail them myself, that would have been too risky. Instead, I paid a courier service to deliver them anonymously, scheduling the drop-offs for noon. By lunchtime, her world would start to crack. But that was only part of it. I wanted Claire to face me, to see the consequences of her betrayal in my eyes before the letters hit. I also wanted Julian to feel the weight of what he'd done, not just to me but to his own carefully curated life. So I planned a confrontation, one that would expose them both in a way they couldn't dodge. I called in sick to work, citing a stomach bug, and waited until Lila was at school and Claire was getting ready to leave for the gallery. She was in our bedroom, slipping into a navy blazer, when I walked in and closed the door behind me. She glanced up, surprised but not alarmed, and smiled that practiced smile. "You're not at work?" she asked, adjusting an earring. "Everything okay?" I leaned against the door, my arms crossed, and studied her. She looked so composed, so unaware of the storm about to break. Claire, I said, my voice calm but cold, we need to talk. Her smile faltered, just for a second. Can it wait? I've got a meeting with the Hendersons in an hour, and they're already breathing down my neck about this audit. No, I said, it can't wait. Sit down. She hesitated, then perched on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan, what's going on? You're acting weird. I didn't sit. I stood, towering over her, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I'd saved one of Vince's photos, the one from La Valette, her in that red dress, Julian's hand on hers. I held it up, the screen glowing between us. Explain this. Her face went pale, her lips parting slightly. For a moment, she didn't speak, just stared at the photo like it was a bomb about to go off. Then she recovered, her voice shaking but defiant. Ethan, that's nothing. It was a client dinner. You're blowing this out of proportion. A client dinner, I repeated, my voice flat. I swiped to the next photo, the motel, her Audi parked next to Julian's BMW. Then the next, texts between them, her words about feeling alive. With each image, her composure cracked a little more, her hands twisting in her lap. Where did you get these? She whispered, her eyes wide. Does it matter? I said. I know, Claire. I've known for weeks. The late nights, the lies, the necklace. I pointed at the crescent moon pendant, and she touched it instinctively, like it could protect her. You've been cheating with Julian Voss. Don't deny it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I'd seen her cry before, when we lost our first pregnancy, when her father passed, and those tears had gutted me. They were just water. Ethan, I'm sorry, she started, her voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. I was going to end it, I swear. End it? I laughed, a bitter sound that made her flinch. You were texting him last night about how perfect it was. Don't lie to me anymore, Claire. You're not good at it. She stood, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Please, Ethan, let's talk about this. For Lila's sake, we can fix this. Lila, I said, and her name in this context felt like a blade. You didn't think about her when you were sneaking off with him, did you? Or when you were lying to my face every day? She was crying now, full-on sobs, but I wasn't done. You're going to lose everything, Claire. The gallery, your reputation, your friends. They'll all know by the end of the day. And Julian? He's finished too. Her eyes widened, panic replacing the tears. What do you mean? What did you do? I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her standing there, her world already starting to unravel. I drove to the gallery where I knew Julian would be. He had a meeting with Claire and the Hendersons to discuss his next exhibit. The timing was perfect. The gallery was quiet when I arrived, just a few staff members arranging pieces in the main hall. I walked straight to Claire's office, where Julian was waiting, leaning against her desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Ethan, he said, straightening. Didn't expect to see you here. I closed the door behind me, locking it. We need to talk, Julian. He raised an eyebrow, that smug confidence still there, but I could see the cracks. The rumors had already started to hit. He'd lost a major collector last week, and his social media was flooded with questions about his work's authenticity. What's this about? He asked, crossing his arms. I didn't waste time. I pulled a folder from my bag, printouts of the same photos and texts I'd shown Claire, plus the blog posts and forum threads I'd seeded. I tossed it onto the desk. You're done, Julian. Your career, your reputation, it's over. And Claire? She's not yours to keep. He opened the folder, his face tightening as he flipped through the pages. You're spying on us? He said, his accent sharper now, his composure slipping. This is pathetic, Ethan. You think you can scare me with this? I don't need to scare you, I said. The art world's already turning on you. Check your email, 2 galleries dropped you this morning. And by tonight, Every critic and collector in your circle will know you're a fraud. Not just your art, your character. He laughed, but it was forced, his eyes darting to the door. You're bluffing. You're just a jealous husband who can't handle that his wife wants someone else. I stepped closer, my voice low. You're a parasite, Julian. You prey on women like Claire, bored and vulnerable, and you think you're untouchable. But you're not. I've made sure of that. Before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mara, Claire's assistant, called out, Julian? The Hendersons are here. And Claire's on the phone. She sounds upset. I smiled. A cold, tight smile. Looks like your meeting's about to get interesting. I left him there, his face pale, and walked out of the gallery. By the time I got to my car, my phone was buzzing. Texts from Claire, pleading, apologizing, begging me to stop whatever I was doing. I ignored them. The courier had done its job. The letters were being delivered. Her sister called me an hour later, furious but also heartbroken, asking if it was true. I said it was and hung up. That night, I took Lila to my parents' house, saying Claire and I needed some time to sort things out. When I got home, Claire was waiting, her face red and swollen from crying. The necklace was gone, tossed somewhere or maybe thrown out. She tried to talk, to explain, but I cut her off. You don't get to fix this, I said. You made your choice. Now live with it. The gallery fired her the next day, citing financial mismanagement from the audit. Julian's career imploded within a week. Major publications ran stories about his alleged forgeries, and his remaining shows were canceled. Claire moved out, staying with her sister, who barely spoke to her. I kept the house, got full custody of Lila, and started rebuilding. The revenge wasn't sweet, not really. It left a hollow ache where love used to be. But it was justice, and it was mine. Claire and Julian would carry the scars of their choices, just as I'd carry mine. And that, for now, was enough.